17 years ago, our principal's voice cracked over the intercom. Lockdown. This is not a drill. That night, the boy everyone ignored knocked on my window and whispered, "I almost did something unforgivable." I can still hear him in the glass when the house goes quiet. My name is Jordan Rise, and back in October 2008, I went to the only high school in our corner of the Bitterroot Valley, Montana, a place where graduating classes were small enough that you knew every face by lunch. We weren't suburban. We were pasture and gravel roads, a gym that smelled like dust and winter, and a media lab full of humming CRT monitors that made everyone look sea green. Caleb Ward sat in the second row, last seat by the wall. If silence had a posture, he had perfected it. Back straight, hands folded, eyes on the keyboard. The seniors from the wrestling team called him Statue, and our teacher, Miss Klein, was the kind that avoids conflict. A paper pellet once bounced off the back of his head and drifted to the floor. She blinked, sighed, and asked us to open our browsers. I told myself I felt bad. I told myself I wasn't part of it because I never laughed. But the truth is, in that room, the loudest people set the terms, and the rest of us hid inside our quiet. One afternoon, I found Caleb alone on the curb outside the school, and knees pulled into his jacket. I had 10 minutes before I had to be at my part-time job in an empty passenger seat. "You need a ride?" I asked. He looked up like I'd stepped out of a different world and then nodded. We drove the back way, 2 lanes, barbed wire fences, clouds snagging on the tips of the bitter roots. He spoke in small pieces, like words were heavy and had to be carried carefully. He said the teasing wasn't just in Media Lab, it was everywhere. When he smiled, it looked under-practiced. The next day, we started saying hi in class. It didn't change the way anyone treated him, and it didn't change the way I pretended not to see. I didn't step in. I told myself it would only make things worse. A week later, Caleb's chair was empty. By 7th period English, the school's ancient intercom hiccuped and then beeped. Our principal's voice came out thinner than usual. "Lockdown. This is not a drill." The room inhaled as one. Our teacher killed the lights and motioned us toward the back corner, shielding the windows with a rolling whiteboard. Somewhere down the hall, a locker slammed, then went very still. 20 minutes passed like 20 hours. Finally, the intercom crackled again. A masked individual with a black duffel had been seen trying to access a side entrance. Doors were secured, law enforcement on site, day dismissed early once the all-clear sounded. Outside, flashing bars of red and blue braided across the parking lot. We left in silence, the way people do after a funeral. That night, long after my parents went to bed, I lay awake listening to the heater tap and the house settle. I was halfway to sleep when I heard it. A soft, polite knock on my window. I sat up too fast and the room spun. Another knock. I pulled the curtain back and there he was. Caleb, washed in porch light, eyes wide and wet with cold. He lifted a hand in a weary little wave. I cracked the window an inch. "Caleb, what are you doing here?" He swallowed. When he spoke, the glass fogged with his breath. I tried to do something bad. Everything in me went still. "Was it you?" I asked. "The lockdown?" He looked down at the railing, then back at me. "Yes. There are moments your brain splits in two. One part cataloging details, the other screaming." He told me he'd biked the long way, that he'd remembered me mentioning the deli near my house and looked for my car. He said he'd brought stuff that shouldn't be near a school, and that he'd stood by the door and couldn't make his hand move. "I got scared," he said. "I think I wanted them to be scared. I think I wanted it to stop. I kept my weight against the sash, as if the inch of wood were a dam." "You can't be here," I said. "You need to go to the school tomorrow and tell them everything." I just needed someone to know first. His voice cracked on the last word. I didn't do it." "Caleb, please, go home." He didn't move. "Can I come in? Just for a minute." I thought about the paper pellet hitting his neck. I thought about all the times I chose the safe silence. I thought about my parents asleep down the hall and the way the principal's voice had shook. I turned my head and said, loud enough to travel, "Dad." Caleb flinched like I'd slapped him. He took one step back, then another. "I'm sorry," he whispered, and then he was gone. Down the porch steps, across the yard, into the dark, where the neighborhood falls away into field. I woke my parents. Words spilled out of me in jolts: window, lockdown, confession. My mom said we had to call. The sheriff's deputy arrived fast, notepad ready, face careful. I gave Caleb's name. I repeated what he'd said. I tried to do something bad. My father stared at the carpet as if the pattern might give him a better answer. They went to Caleb's house that night. He wasn't there. By morning, word sifted through the halls like dust. Caleb was found, or he went home and the sheriff was waiting, depending on who you asked. What settled into fact was simpler and heavier. He admitted what he'd told me and turned over the bag. In the days that followed, adults said phrases we'd never had to say out loud before. Terroristic threats. Felony. Our media lab was extra quiet that week. Screen fans and pulsing cursors and the open space where his chair used to be. The years after that have a way of blurring. I left, like people do. College, work, another state. But sometimes out of nowhere I see the window pane haze and his face on the other side of it. Tired, hopeful, frightened, asking to be let in. The official line I heard later was that he served his time and got out long ago. I don't know where he is. I don't know if anyone ever really asked him the questions that mattered, or if they just asked the ones that fit on a form. Here's what I do know. Cruelty compounds interest. Silence cosigns it, and it's easier to call a person a monster than to ask how long they were left alone with the dark. On cold nights, when the house tightens and the heater taps, I still hear that gentle knock and the breath on the glass. I still hear my own voice call for Dad. I still wish I had known how to say anything better than go away and tell someone else. I tell myself that opening the window wouldn't have changed the past. Maybe that's true. Maybe it isn't. But I think about the chair in the second row by the wall, and how an entire room can hear the same little click of paper against a skull and decide to let it pass like weather. And I think about a boy who stood at a door with a bag in his hands and chose not to open it. I hope wherever he is that someone finally opened one for him.